begin. This press conference will be streamed live at tiff.net, and it's also on the TIFF channel of YouTube. There are volunteers in the room to assist you with your questions. Please remember to identify yourself and your media outlet. If you've been pre-approved to take we ask that you do so from the 5th row back. No other photography is permitted. If you're interested in photos from today's session, available on the media.
We were kids with dreams and no sense of reality, and survived, and we're here. Those are the kind of moments in a life that you just don't get over.
So without any further ado, enjoy the show.
Thank you.
I always get a little nervous when you have to show a film here because in many ways it's like bringing something home to the family.
Yeah, it's shot in Toronto, but you're trying to make it look like New York. I said, yeah, that's great. You know, that's not bad. Because the city's like an actor.
Premiering a movie that took me
Thank you all for coming, getting up early. We have, as you can tell, a jam-packed panel today, so let me tell you about who's coming in to speak with us. Director Jean-Marc Vallée's films include Crazy, The Young Victoria, Café de Flore, Dallas Buyers Club, and Wild. He is an Academy Award nominee and the director of Demolition. Jake Gyllenhaal is a frequent guest at TIFF starting 10 years ago with Brokeback Mountain, a film that earned him an Academy Award nomination for actor in a supporting role. Since then, he starred in Jarhead, Zodiac, Rendition, Nightcrawler, Prisoners, and Enemy, amongst many others. Two-time Oscar nominee Naomi Watts has 2 films at TIFF this year, Demolition and About Ray. She's been here many times before in films like St. Vincent, The Impossible, Eastern Promises, and I Heart Huckabees. Oscar winner Chris Cooper first visited TIFF for American Beauty and has since starred in 30 films, including Syriana, Seabiscuit, The Town, and many, many others. Demolition is Judah Lewis's first film, but he'll soon be seen as the young Johnny Utah in Point Break. And writer Brian Sipe has 5 screenplays to his credit, including A Million Miles, Alpha Male, The Choice, and Demolition. And they'll all be up to join us in just a second. Bruce, I know you have questions. It's my film festival tradition to start with Bruce Kirkland. It's not a film festival until he asks the first question at the first press conference. So we'll get to that in just a sec. Come on up. Help me welcome everybody. Congratulations on the film. It played to a packed house last night at the Princess of Wales Theatre. The audience, I was there, the audience loved the film. And Jean-Marc, before the film started, you said that this was probably your most rock and roll film to date. I'm going to respectfully disagree with you and say that it's probably the most punk rock film because it's all about tearing down, destroying before you build up again. Is that something you might agree with?
Yeah, all right. I will accept this contradiction. And punk rock, yeah, punk rock is cool too. But I mean, what I was saying, and that's how I feel by its nature. This film, its energy, its spirit, its rhythm, its themes, what it offers. It's rock and roll, and it makes noise, and it provokes, and it makes you think. And that's why I was saying that. And of course, there's so many rock and roll tracks in the film. So, yeah.
And this script first came to you about 4 years ago. What is it about a project like this, about a script like this, that keeps you enthusiastic, that keeps you on board for that amount of time? Is it all the things that you just said? And more?
It's more. I mean, Brian's script was amazing. Was something special and unique. It's rare to read something that powerful where you just turn the pages and you're surprised. You don't know where you're going. Where is this guy? What's his quest? What is this? And you just want to turn the pages and you laugh. you're shocked by a moment. It's edgy. It was irreverent, provocative, and always deeply moving. And I could relate to the character, to Jake's character, and I guess that's what kept me on. And I wanted to direct this beautiful script, and that's it. Yeah, choosing your film is choosing your lifestyle. So when you find a piece of material like this, I want to do it badly.
And Jake, this is, I would imagine, a difficult character to play, although that's for you to tell us. But it's a character who we can't quite figure out for a good chunk of the movie, I think. So tell me about calibrating that kind of performance and coming up with a performance that you know that the audience is going to have to work towards to get on side with, but we have to stay interested in the character the whole time. So does that present a challenge to you, or is it just what's on the page is what you do?
I mean, I think there's an inherent trust in the tone that Jean-Marc was going for from the beginning. And for me, I think there's a sort of a patience and an insular kind of quality to the character. And a searching in general, like Jean-Marc said, there's sort of like a continuous search as the character. So there's a decision I made very early on where the search as the character was equally as interesting as the search as the actor, and we were kind of working in tandem in that way. And I think also this is about a guy who really doesn't know what he feels or how he feels because he's been sort of mired and locked in convention for so long. What I loved about it was that it was a story about, a guy who begins the movie in the conventional way and ends the movie through an unconventional journey, feeling however he's supposed to feel, not how, the society's told him to feel. And I think that's a bit uncomfortable, particularly as an actor, to try and figure out not what you've been told, grief is supposed to be, but just discovering as you go and doing it with him. So it was really actually a journey the whole time. I don't think there was ever a decision made early on or even during it. It was just a process. Yeah.
Naomi, we almost feel like we know Karen before we see her. We hear her voice frequently. You're a presence in the film before you're actually a presence in the film, before you're actually a visual in the film. Tell me what your take on that character was, and if it's important for you as an actor to understand the journey of the person that you're playing opposite.
Yeah, I mean, I think Karen is a mysterious person. She's lived her life in a very sort of, she's coasting along and not terribly unhappy, but not in touch with herself, and there's definitely missing parts. And I think her world collides with Jake's character, and which would never normally happen. And when it does, it's like a wake-up call for both of them. And she just instantly responds to his letters because she's lonely and feels disconnected to the world. And you couldn't get two more opposite people coming together, and yet they somehow have a great effect on one another. So yeah, it was important to know the journey that he was going through, and right away when I came on the set, first of all, we did lots of the phone calls, and I didn't really have a vibe of the set of what's going on, and I was literally at home in my house.
So they were done well in advance.
Yes. Before I came onto the set, and so it was unusual way to sort of break into the filmmaking process, and then I got there and just really was blown away by the way Jean-Marc works, in that he's the mind never stops, and he is like doing something and then he can completely change the idea of the scene and reinvent it in an incredibly new and spontaneous way, and that's such a wonderful way for an actor to work. So you never feel locked in something. You don't get stuck in those rhythms, and it's infectious, and it keeps things really exciting.
Judah, this is your first film. And tell me a little bit about being dropped into the middle of this, of all of this. It's a big film, big stars, deep concepts. It's a complicated film. Tell me a little bit about your experience of working on it.
It was incredible, really.
Yeah.
I mean, to be in with such an amazing cast and crew, and to be working with these people that, you know, most people would only dream of working with, that's a really incredible thing. And I mean, I think it was definitely like a learning experience for me. You know, all of these guys are so experienced and they're so good at what they do, so I feel like a lot of what I was doing is just trying to like kind of watch them and kind of take it in, and because they know so much and I was learning so much from them.
And Chris, your character is someone who goes through a huge arc in this film, but in specific in relationship to Jake's character, you are by times accepting, by times not so much. Just tell me a little bit about making that character someone that the audience can relate to and be on side with, because the obvious is that he's lost a daughter and he's grieving and he doesn't like what his former son-in-law is up to, but there's more to it than that, I think. Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, no, I'm just asking about there are moments in the film that I guess. You know what? I don't know. I'm not sure I know what the question is there. There are moments. The character is a complicated character, but I think seems fairly straightforward in the playing of it. But it's
Yes.
not. It's not at all.
Okay, so in the relationship with Jake's character and mine, I mean, you know, we've been in the investment banking for, and I don't know if the film mentions it, but I brought him up in the business for like 10 years, you know, and I must say, probably as a father, not so knowledgeable or observant about how this relationship is going, and so I don't know. I mean, I'm just in a nutshell. This is a study in, as it's been said, a study in grief and people's different reaction to it, and his reaction is so curious that the father has great concern for him, but it's also extremely frustrating what I'm observing in his reaction to our daughter's death. You know, I don't know. It's pretty routine, natural occurrence of events that are pretty make a lot of sense and seem pretty simple to follow. You know.
And Brian, tell me the inspiration for this story.
Well, I used to do demolition work. I was 16, 17, 18 years old, and I can remember being in these burned out houses. My job was to go in there and take these places apart. So you start with, you know, people walk away from a fire, you know, so the furniture's there, their clothes are there, so you start pulling all that stuff out and throwing into these dumpsters, and you're getting filthy, and then you start pulling the walls down, and then you start pulling the insulation out, and now you're hot and you're dirty and you're itchy. And I never knew how that stuff was put together. You know, I'm working for a contractor who's a builder, and his job is to put it back together, and I never understood like how things were put together. But once I was able to pull it all apart, see the frame, and could say like, oh yeah, that's the door, that's how they hold the roof up, and the door's there. I couldn't build it, but I get it, you know. And I think even at that age, before I was a writer, you know, my writer's brain was already processing that analogy, and it came in handy years later.
We'll turn to Bruce Kirkland right here, and we get him a microphone. Thank you.
Good morning, Bruce Kirkland, Toronto Sun Media. The brilliance of this film for me last night was in the times when no one was saying anything. And Naomi, you talked a little bit about working with Jean-Marc and how he talks a lot and thinks a lot. And yet the film does very little of that, and that's part of the brilliance of your script, too. So I'm curious about the working relationship between the two of you to get those moments when there was a physical manifestation of the metaphor that Brian was talking about, the demo, versus those interior emotional moments that were just so shattering. How do you guys work that out?
I mean, I will say just from being inside of it, you know, like Naomi said, there's a sort of presence of the moment with him, particularly in the decision and how he shoots his movies. You know, it's a very intimate crew. You know, there are very few people there. It's him shooting you most of the time, and what he does initially is there's a physicality, particularly with Davis. There was a physicality always. So we'd always do something physical. With the Demolition, you know, he built an entire half of a house, and then he gave me and Judah tools, and we were there, and we were supposed to we destroyed the house ourselves. Maybe he destroyed a couple things because he needed to, because he had spent so much time preparing it, and he had really looked forward to, I think, probably breaking some windows.
So good.
Yeah. But it was like a day of that, you know, days of that, and coupled with occasionally times where there would be a stillness, and then it would just be us. It would just be him and the camera and me in moments. And we would vacillate between very active moments where things were very physical. He'd be even running around. Sometimes what happens is with him is he runs around a set looking for shots and looking for angles and looking for beautiful, you know, for a long time it was about, I would watch him, which is really interesting. Look for reflections and things. He has this obsession in this movie with the reflections and things. And so he'll look for spaces where he can find an image reflected on something else. And because there's a quiet, and because you can only sort of hear him, watch him, when he does come back at you, you're carrying this energy that he has in his process. You know, you're carrying that energy in the stillness of a moment, even when he's very close with you. So it's fascinating. The irony of it is that sometimes in those silences, I'm watching him, you know, behind the camera. And I think that draws something out of someone. A lot of times with an actor, there's obviously a real self-consciousness. There's a sense of sometimes, you know, obviously vanity. Well, I mean, I don't know why that would be. But with him, and you know, you come to set, you drive to set, or you walk to set. In the case of this movie, sometimes because I live in New York City, and like occasionally the set was nearby. You would walk to set, and then you'd go in your trailer, put on your wardrobe, no makeup, nothing, and you'd come to set at 6 a.m. You'd arrive on set at 6 a.m. You'd start shooting at 6:05. You know, so there was just never really any time for the brain to be involved in the process. You were just existing with him. And then I loved also, we got a secondhand, I don't know, we got the secondhand where I started to see his process, not only as a director, but also his post-production process in the production process. So he's editing in his mind, obviously. And you know, he at a certain point by the end of the shooting, it was like, you walk into frame, and then I know immediately he was going to turn around, and then I'd walk right out of frame. Do you know what I mean? It was like, and you just feel him, and it is that literal. I think actors and directors talk a lot about dancing with each other or whatever, but it is actually literally a dance on his set. So when you're dancing, like I did also, when you stop, I think the energy of that movement is in the stillness. Yeah.
Judah, was the day that you tore down the house the best day? No. Was the day you tore down the house like the best day of the shoot?
You know, it was definitely up there.
Yeah.
That was a fun one.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was going to say it's thank you, Jake, for these nice words and to describing the process like this, and I relate to what you just said, and at the same time we found ourselves actors. Brian was on the set every day, and a bunch of creative people, and the beauty of it now is the more I shoot, the more I'm on a set, the more, you know, I see that we're all aiming for the same thing, and that thing can happen on the day, on the spot where we have an ID. It could come from Chris, from Judah, from Naomi, and of course these moments of silence, without the dialogues. Some of them happen like when Karen is in her room and she is in her son's room, picking up the clothes and everything. We just created that scene at the last moment, and Brian came up with that scene, and no dialogues, a voiceover. We started to write a little bit more for her, and same with Jake. This breakdown moment in the bathroom where this guy doesn't. I mean, he's saying and he's saying that it doesn't feel anything to this guy in the train, and he becomes emotional when he says it, and I like the contradiction. And I like that he goes and he shows off saying, I don't know what I'm feeling, and I'm being honest, and I would like to do what you're able to do. And then he's in the bathroom, and do you miss her? And there's no answer, and we see him getting out of the shower, and it's coming, and with a beautiful breathing moment, and of course he misses her. And what are you holding back? Why are you afraid to go through this emotion? You're gonna break down, and you're afraid of breaking down. And this evolution is so nice to see his character breaking down at the end through also his father-in-law. That is the total opposite, who is the total opposite. He's so close to his emotion, he's holding back from the very first moment we see him at the hospital. So it's nice, this contrast, and of course, contrast between the voiceover, what he's saying, this letter, what Brian came up to, this letter to a vending machine, come on. It's what a beautiful, thing to.
We're gonna go right here in the center.
Okay.
Microphone.
I'm waiting for Latin America. I have a question for Jake, maybe Naomi could get us in. Since the character is so curious and has so many curiosities, what are your curiosities in real life outside of the movies? And the second question would be, since we are celebrating 4 years with the Toronto Film Festival, what are the places in Toronto that you both would recommend to follow your steps outside of Twitter or Facebook here in Toronto?
You go for that.
No. I find Naomi Watts a curious being. So that's answer number one. And number two, places in Toronto, is that what you said? You want a shout out? Is that what you're asking for? For a restaurant or something, or a hair salon? What's your preference, You just let me know and I'll give you what you want.
Well, I don't know. I mean, for you, the best places that you would recommend people to go to visit in Toronto?
I really feel like, being an American, that's not appropriate for me to be recommending, but I'll give it my best shot. Naomi, can you answer? It was for both of us.
The park is great.
We can give you a minute to think about that, and we'll go for another question. Right here, the guy with the beard, please. Right there, and then we'll go right behind her. Yep.
Good morning, everyone. Barbara Dudinska, Slovak News Agency. I have a question for Jake. So in the movie, you wrote a handwritten complaint. Have you ever sent a handwritten letter to somebody before? And on a side note, yesterday we talked about a complaint you wrote as a child. I look into it. They are back. The Chicken Littles are back.
They are?
They are.
I'll explain to everybody else in the room what
Thank
you
you.
mean. When I was a little child, I was at school, and we were supposed to learn how to write letters and complaint letters, and so I decided to write to Kentucky Fried Chicken and tell them that I was upset that they had discontinued Chicken Littles, which were a particular type of mini hamburger with fried chicken in the middle of it. It was deeply upsetting to me at the time, and I felt like they should bring him back, and I think I indirectly had something to do with that. So, it's empowering, and I encourage most people, they can to really express themselves and bring back whatever they feel like has been taken away from them in their lives. And in my case, really important things like fried chicken. Seriously. But no, have I ever written a letter? Yes, I've written a letter. I am an actor, but we do know how to write. And I have written handwritten letters, and I really do think that those things that are handwritten are becoming obviously less and less of an importance to certain generations. And I think what's really nice, particularly about this story, is that, you know, you don't have anything in email. It's not an email, you know, it's not, it's old school in that way. If someone trying to express themselves in a very primal way, you know, actually writing something is not happening as much anymore. And that's why I loved it. You know, it ironically feels fresh because it's old school. There's not a desperation to like change it to supposed time. And that's what I loved about that primary idea in this story. The only time a phone really appears is like when he takes a picture of the vending company machine. And that was something that he really wanted to keep out of the movie, was this idea of current technology. And I really loved that.
Go ahead.
Steven from Belgium. I have a question for Judah and Jake. You share some magical moments dancing in the movie. Can you tell us a little bit about about the process? How did you find those moves?
Judah taught me how to dance, so I don't. Maybe you should take that question.
I think that the music was definitely a big part of it, and Jean-Marc, you know, his sense of music is just above my level. I don't even know. But he would find these songs that I had never heard of, and I'd listen to, and it sets a mood, and it gives you some type of feeling, I feel like. And I think, at least for myself, that was a lot of those dancing scenes, was just kind of feeling the music and kind of what it was kind of simulating, or just kind of the rhythm of it, really.
What about you? Well, you know, he made this iPod that I didn't know any of the songs on it, you know, and he never showed it to me until I was supposed to start dancing. But it's the same part of the process, you know. He sets things up early on for you, which are intimidating, you know. These, particularly for the character that I was playing, he really only gave me a few moments of expression, you know, particular type of expression. And that was, you know, I was always sort of, in the process of shooting the movie, I was always like looking on the schedule as to when the dancing was gonna be, because I was mostly just terrified, you know. He was pulling me back in a lot of ways, and then allowing me at times. He opened the door and he went, go, you know. So I wasn't actually looking forward to the go at a certain point, just I feel like as the character was. But then as soon as the doors opened, the first time we ever danced was, we were on a train shooting all the train stuff, and at the end of the day, he just said, okay, the train's pulling in, get on your earphones, and he like handed me an iPod, and he gave me the earphones, and he's, you ready to dance? And I was like, what? Oh, shit, you know? And then he was like, let's go. And I walked out and started dancing amongst all the commuters that were actually there, you know? And I had no choice, you know? I had no choice in the matter, really. And then when we started dancing in New York City, we also did that. We were shooting up top in the office buildings, and we just took the elevator down. And Jean-Marc just shoots in this where he can shoot anywhere. And we just started going. I mean, we walked like up from Battery Park City all the way up to like almost like 14th Street, like shooting, dancing. By the end, I didn't want to stop, and he had to stop me. He like made a whirling dervish or something. It was like so fun. But I mean, that was really the spirit, and the dancing was just, I didn't even know how much I wanted to express. He had sort of pushed so much down in the process that when he allowed it, he was like, here's your little ticket to ride, so go, you know? And it's just really all him and his sort of strange little master plan he has. But he comes to you too, like, oh, we're gonna do a scene in the car where you're gonna just, let's talk about the, you're gonna basically just break down, and you're like, what? And it's like, we're on 86th Street and Madison Avenue, and it's like, it's like that, and that's his spirit, it's just, feelings don't come when we expect them to. So he shoots a movie in the same way, and I think that's what his movie is about. So it's not just thematically, but it's sort of weaved into the unconscious of the storytelling of this film. And it takes a very keen eye to see really also what he's trying to do. I think that's why the movie is so fascinating to watch, because it's not telling you the obvious in the conventional way. And that's beautiful, because I think that's how we walk through life,
Another question right there.
Barbara Van Jerry from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. This question is for Jake. I know you obviously dealt with grief in Southpaw, and I wondered if that influenced how you approached this in any way or helped shape it?
No, I mean, every project is different. I mean, I think that really this is generated by Jean-Marc. I mean, there's something I would say about working with him, and I don't know if you guys agree, but, there are times where you're alone in a scene as an actor. You exist with your feelings, particularly if you're dealing with an issue like grief. You're sitting there alone, even if it's in front of the camera, and not to say you're not there with someone, but Jean-Marc would come up to me before a scene with tears in his eyes, before my character even had tears in his eyes. And he would be there right with me, like deep in wherever I was or wherever he wanted me to go, and say, look, I've been here, I'm here now, come join me, And I think, and I don't want to speak for you, but I think the reason why you've told me you made this movie is because of all those feelings around your own situations and grief. And I think this was in terms of the difference in Southpaw and this, is like, there's a real isolation in that movie. In this movie, I felt like I attached myself to him, and he sort of guided me along. And I wasn't as alone, because this movie is really his mind as much as the character. And that's an amazing thing for me to even watch in retrospect.
We just have time for one more question right there.
Yes, I'm Kerstin from Dagens Nyheter, Sweden. I was curious about the very daring editing of this film, especially the first half, right after the accident. Was that already, I wanted to ask Brian, did you already see these jump cuts story-wise, or this fragmented, the way the movie moved forward?
Well, Jean-Marc edited the movie.
Yes.
And I think that's very, he has his own style, and if you look at his other movies, it's something that he does, and that wasn't, I don't think that was really in the script. I mean, I think he took those moments and he put it into his own language.
Well, I see. Of course, yeah. There's a lot happening too in the cutting room, but it wasn't a linear structure. And after meeting with Heather in the casting room in New York, I loved that actress so much, her face, and I told Brian, we gotta see this girl more in the film. And the concept on the page, she was in the first scene. And she was in the first scene, and that was it.
But you don't even, on the page, you don't even see her face until the very end when he's looking at pictures of her.
And then I said, Brian, let me, why don't you write moments? Why don't you give me moments of where can we see this girl in the film? And let me shoot this, we'll see, we'll try what's on the page, the concept. But the more we were shooting, and he was agreeing, and then he came up with these situations, okay, we're gonna see her in the living room here, and she bought some stuff, and again, all this geeko seashell thing was an idea that appeared that arrived 1 week before we started to shoot. And we decided
notes,
that these seashells was another reminder of her presence. And she loved that YouTube video, and she was into seashells and seahorses. And so we wrote some
and
stuff.
a lot of that stuff was happening on a daily basis during production. I mean, that was, for me, something that was so exciting because he kept me involved and was so inclusive, you know, that the project for me still felt alive. Every day it was a confluence of ideas, and I'm pitching him something, he's pitching me something, and I'm talking out ideas with Jake in the hallway and coming up with new things that we can shoot tomorrow. And then the next day you're like, wow, we were just talking about this yesterday, and now here we are. All those things that we talked about in the scene are here, and we're shooting it. And you know, for a writer, you know, you sit so long with something, and you almost forget that this isn't supposed to be something you put on a shelf. It's supposed to be performed, and here it was, you know, being performed.
So at the end, he's got to take some credit. It wasn't just editing. It was on the page. I mean, this whole thing between the letters and cutting to her at one point when she's in the shower, and then him, and then going back to her, and that was on the page. It was brilliant. It was very well written.
And we should mention that Heather Lind is here somewhere. She was right there a few minutes ago. Is she right here? I can't see her from here, but Heather Lind is here. There she is.
Heather was such a trooper because we were adding these moments, and then sometimes it was happening like we had the idea at 8 in the morning. Let's call Heather. Let's see if she's available at 12. Yeah, right now I got it. Okay, and she was jumping on a train or a cab, and back she was coming, or we call.
Like that scene where we were shooting the airport, and he wanted her at the airport, so she literally flew into the airport that we were shooting in, and then she flew back out 6 or 8 hours later, something from the same airport we were shooting in.
Wow.
I think one of my favorite moments in the movie now is it was never in the script, but including her in the carousel scene, and that was one of the last minute. Let's bring her in. We've got this carousel, and what a beautiful moment that ended up being in the end. You know.
True, and we shot that so quickly, and she was again willing to come at the last minute, and it was getting dark, and so we shot the carousel scene, the daytime carousel scene with Chris and Jake, and then whoops, she arrived, and it was nighttime, and we just ad-libbed some shots on the carousel, and it became part of his memory, you know.
That's all the time we have. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Brian, Chris, Judah, Naomi, Jake, and Jean-Marc.
Thank you.
Thank you.